Oh my goodness, super excited right now. Session 3 of the day, and I am joined by the wonderful and magnificent women that are Rosalind J Turner and Susie Mackie. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Anything.
Oh my goodness, so excited. So just for those who know me, who are watching, I met Rosalind about 10 years ago. I kind of want to say that you found me, I believe, online.
I did find you. Yes, yes,
Never.
I did find you.
And so we've had this kind of lovely relationship over 10 years. Oh my goodness, so much wisdom this woman has to pour out. So looking forward to having her do that. Susie, I met more recently, but I still want to say, is it about 5 years?
Oh, it must be 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And we met through Carrie, another beautiful, dynamic woman who has had some real experiences and has learnt some pretty steep lessons from each and every one of them.
She's in my book. Bless you, Rosalind.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
It's what does the J stand for? It's a bit like J.K. Rowling. You've got Rosalind.
Oh, I see. It's Jane.
Okay,
it's Jane. Yeah,
well.
it's just that it's just a bit of a mouthful, is it? Rosalind J Turner, and it's just like, but I quite like having some reference to it in there.
That's nice. I like it.
And actually, to be honest, it was because when I first did a website with my name, it was because there's some doctor of something or other called Rosalind Turner, and whenever you put in Rosalind Turner, she would come up, and I thought, well, that's no good. Then I'll have to stick my initial.
No, I like it. It works.
Yes.
Thanks.
Sorry, I digressed then.
We're allowed to digress because guess what? We're freedom. Freedom allows us to do just that. So today, and this particular session, we're going to look at obviously self-care. We've named the event today as a whole radical self-care because I believe the time has come to turn that tide and start looking at self-care differently, but also implementing it differently. We've had a kind of lifetime of being told that self-care is this lovely, soft, fluffy, pampery, blah, blah, blah. And I'm all for pampering, don't get me wrong. But fundamentally, self-care is so much more than that.
It's not just a bubble bath.
Yeah.
With or without champagne.
With preferably. And yet, we want to get to the meat of the conversations of why self-care is so important, and the things that potentially in this session anyway, that kind of get in the way, that have caused us these issues of truly connecting with what it means to self-care. But before we kind of get into those questions, I am sure everyone would like to know much more about you two wonderful women, and I would like to give you the opportunity to do that. So perhaps, Rosalind, kickstarting with you, just a bit about you, your journey, what radical self-care means to you.
Okay. How long have I got? First question.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. Goodness, that's luxurious.
At the most.
Well, it's very difficult when somebody asks you that. It's like, where do you start? So I think, what will I start with? So I grew up in northeast Lincolnshire, and I remember once meeting somebody and saying, I come from Lincolnshire, and they said, oh yes, Lincolnshire, big skies, narrow vision. And that's why I left. I'm sorry if anybody's joining from Lincolnshire. But there was something, I think it's more about the fact that I grew up in an end of the line place, a small seaside resort. And with a small seaside resort, you don't get through traffic. So places can become quite static, as opposed to any of the kind of major cities that are like arteries, where there's a lot flowing through. so eventually I escaped. My early experiences there, I come from a family that had a very particular, all families have their very particular ways, don't they, of being, and particular narratives. And mine certainly had a very particular narrative. And yes, what can I say about that other than it was, let's just say the narratives were less than helpful. And so initially, you know, once I'd sort of grown from being a child into a young person, I think I was in the stage of fleeing. fleeing the narratives, fleeing myself, you know, and that in itself, you know, brings a lot of wisdom, you know, in a way. So what else would I say? I think when one has a tricky start, you know, a start that has lots of challenges in it, that sets one off on a very particular trajectory. And I think one of the things that's been both, what would I say? It's been both an advantage and a disadvantage in the way that I approach things, is that I would just throw in the towel. I would take big risks, but I would also throw in the towel. It's like, oh, that's not working, I'm going, you know, so I would just move on to the next thing, you know. So, you know, I think there was a lovely phrase in the 1930s, oh, she's a bit of a bolter, you know. So I was definitely a bit of a bolter, you know, like I would go somewhere, I'd live something for a while, and then I'd go, well, that's not working, poof, and I'd be off. And I think there's a lot of value in that, and also sometimes there's a I can't remember the name of the book. I can remember the name, but I can't remember the woman who wrote it. But there's a book called Staying with the Trouble, and there's something about that I'm really interested in now, and definitely feels very appropriate for this discussion as well.
Yes.
I'm sorry about the background noise. I forgot to turn off my notifications on my phone. And it's over there. Life not being perfect.
Absolutely, we don't need perfect.
So where am I in terms of time? And I can move on to.
Yeah, you've got another 2 minutes, Rosalind.
Okay. So thinking about Shouldisms. Well, definitely coming from this particular family, there were a lot of Shouldisms. And as a little girl, I remember thinking, why would you do that? You know, so there's something about that that's been really fascinating, you know, for me. I think partly because of this experience in this particular family, I spent a lot of time kind of being sort of slightly in an observer position, sort of watching and thinking, why would you do it like that? And I particularly had that question around the dynamic. I grew up in the 60s, so you know, around the dynamic of men and women. I was, and we're not talking the swinging 60s, you know, in sort of northeast Lincolnshire, like, you know, at that time. So I guess I have that question a lot. You know, it's like, why would you do it like that? And that is now the question that informs my work very much so now. So. I'm aware that I'm answering this from a very sort of broad brushstroke, but I know that we're going to get into the meat of this as we travel down the road. So
indeed.
So yeah, so I think I'll stop there for now.
Okay, fantastic. And Susie.
Do you know, I love the word that you used. You gained a lot of wisdom from the narrative of your background. Because when I very first saw you, I just thought, gosh, that's a very wise woman. I would trust her with anything. And so thank you. Just your demeanor. I didn't take a lot of wisdom from my rather dysfunctional upbringing and family narrative. I did leave, but it affected. I'm very sensitive, people-pleasing second daughter, and it with the school, private girls' school, ruled by fear and humiliation. My parents were, well, they should have, you know, they should have divorced. everybody would have been a lot happier. And I just felt that with every single step of the way, it all kept coming, and my self-worth just went lower and lower. And that was the narrative of my life till probably 58. I'm 64 now. So I was a late developer. but it's brought me my why and my passion that it's never too late. And that's my, my audience is over 50. So and it feels so good. I had some healing not long ago for long COVID. I nearly died of COVID last year. And both my parents died in the last couple of years, and it's all been a bit hellish. And this wonderful healer said, I feel that all your life you've been stifled. So, and that was a very powerful word to be stifled, and it's true. But I let myself be stifled, and that's the balance of it, is that, but with the personality that you're born with and the upbringing that you have to be obedient. In my first marriage, who was an army captain, I promised to obey. Well, what a foolish thing that was.
Yeah, what possessed you?
Because a year later, oh my God, when I was leaving him with the help of my father, and my mother had said, you can't divorce him. We don't have divorce in our family. And then 3 weeks later, she said, well, if you're going to leave him, do it quickly because you're no spring chicken. I was 20. So he said, you can't leave me. You promised to obey, which is the first line in my story and my anthologies of women's stories that I've authored. So it's been a bloody long haul, actually, to get to the place where I am now, which is helping women believe in their value as women, as well as what they do in their career. And of course, self-care is a huge part of that. And yes, I think, Yvonne, you're right. It has to be radical, because unless we actually perhaps stamp our feet a bit and say, damn it, I'm worth this, then we're just going to brush it to one side and soldier on. I remember on the radio a while ago, you asked me what was my top tip for self-care. And my top tip is you just believe that you're worth practicing it in the first place.
Yes.
So we could talk all week on this subject. So shall I stop there and let's sort of get into the
meat of it. Yes, I love it. And that point that you made there, Susie, about being a late developer, but isn't this the beauty of realizing that at any given moment we can do things differently?
Never too late. One of my
go in another direction. We do not have to be stuck in the same old stories and narratives and all of that stuff. We can find a better way, and I think something that Rosalind talks about in Bravery School, be brave enough to just do it.
I think also it's don't be afraid to ask for help. I was so afraid to ask for help, and I asked for help on social media about I think it was about gaining some more photo shoots to do for people to earn some money, and because I've been a pro photographer for 12 years, I think, and it's all part of the business of female empowerment. And that's a new thing for me, because people come to me and I give off myself and I give this, and I'm not getting paid for anything. So I'm thinking, okay, if I talk about the business of self-empowerment, that sends a different message out there. So I know I've gone blonde. I've forgotten what I was going to say.
That's a terrible thing to say.
Actually, it's grey, but I'm proud of my grey hair. Somebody was saying I'm proud of my wrinkles. I've earned them. So my apologies, viewers, because we're talking about this never too late and all of that sort of thing. Yeah,
it's all good. It's all good. These things happen as we age, no doubt. Okay, So Rosalind actually touched on that very first thing about what I call them should-isms. Everything that we should do. We should be good parents, whatever that means. We should be fantastic partners and friends, and we should care for, and the list goes on of all of these things. And I think the history tells us that that's where our value comes from. Only when we have been this perfect mother, wife, whatever it is, can we truly say that we're worth anything. And that for me is like, no, stop.
We're not just a role. We're not just a role. We are
absolutely
human beings first and foremost.
Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to ask, because I know we all have had them, but what should-isms have you experienced, or at least one of them, and how did they affect you, your self-worth, your confidence, and what are you doing differently now, if at all, if you are doing anything differently now? So maybe just think of one that you think, well, that was a should-ism, I absolutely lived that one out to the full, and then I suddenly realized, and now I do, as a possible lead.
I have actually banished the word should from my dictionary vocabulary, and I encourage others to do the same, because I think it's an incredibly damaging, controlling word. And as somebody who used to be obedient, you should do that, you shouldn't do that. It sends such a negative message. And I suppose my shoulds and shouldn't were all around doing as I was told, obeying, even as an adult. And when you've lived that life of doing as you are told, even in my older years, with my mother, bless her, was very controlling. It affected me. And I can say this. I mean, she died a year ago last March, and I cared for her for the last 3 months of her life. I held her hand as she died, and it was hugely healing and wonderful for both of us. Well, except that not for her, because she died, but she was in her 80s. But before that, even a couple of years before that, I had thought to myself, do I have to wait until she's dead before I feel free? And that's an awful thing to think. And but it was the shoulds, it was the obedience, it was the do as I tell you, it was the, so yes, just banish that word and encourage others to, if they say to you, because we're hard on ourselves, it's, oh, I shouldn't do that. Rethink it, and try to get others to stop telling. If somebody says to me, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, I'll say, hang on a minute, let's talk about this.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing though. Challenge it. So when somebody does tell you you should, well, can you explain to me why I should? What's the should? Because I think sometimes people use the language and they're not even really hearing themselves.
Yes.
Well, it's very controlling, isn't it?
Yeah.
You should do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be perceived as being, oh, you should go and do this because it's, but actually it's should is just why? Why should I?
Absolutely. Rosalind, what about you?
Gosh, difficult to pick one. Yeah, so I guess people pleasing, I'm, as those who know me will tell you, that's really not my bag. And I'm not very interested in it. I'm sort of, and I think I used to do it. It was so long ago now. I think I used to do it when I was quite a lot younger, with bouts of rebellion. So there'd be some people pleasing and then bouts of, opposition to whatever was happening. And there's so much conditioning for women about people pleasing, which is a whole other week's conversation. And I guess another big one which I see for women is the idea that, and it crops up in as a kind of backstory that's going on in most women's lives, certainly that the women I have spoken to in however long, you know, and that's tidying up. You know, so I don't constantly, that's not fair. I frequently live in chaos. And it's not because I'm choosing to live in chaos, it's because I'm choosing not to tidy up. I'm going, okay, so I'm looking at my day going, or my week, and going, actually, I've got this, 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 and this, and this that I want to do. And I'm prioritizing. For me, it's swimming and saunaing. That's like my absolute go-to for my physical and mental health.
Yes.
And then, you know, whatever else is going on, and, you know, earning money, however I'm doing that, and, you know, etc., etc., etc. And then it's like, have I got time to do any domestics? Oh, no, not again. You know, like, once again, no, I haven't. No, I live on my own. So actually that's quite easy for me if I choose to live in utter chaos and not wash up for a week and all of those kind of things. That's absolutely fine. That's my shout. I think it is, of course, more challenging when you live with other people. But what I often see is where it's the default position of the woman in the house to do it. Yes. And I guess that's, I'm going, it's like, well, why is it only your role? Whose things are they? That
especially when so many women are now working or career women. It's, you know, why shouldn't it be? Would you remember that? I don't know if it still stands, pink jobs and blue jobs. You remember?
Oh,
yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But you see, I really love that take, Rosalind, that it's because cleaning is probably one of the most common, you know, you should clean your house, you should tidy, you should da, 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 da. Now, if somebody is saying, well, this is my space and actually I'm going to treat it the way that I like to, whatever that looks like, who is anyone else to challenge that? With,
well, it's not that I necessarily like living in chaos. I just want to put that, you know. But you know, if I have to kind of look at my list of things, it's I don't enjoy doing domestic work. I will do it, and I'll listen to audiobooks and podcasts and things while I do it, you know, on a day when I've, you know, allotted time for that. But it's not my favorite activity.
But actually, you're prioritizing self-care over domestic work.
Absolutely, I am prioritizing self-care over domestic.
It's wise.
Yes. And that's what I mean. It doesn't, for me, the whether it's chaos or not, because define chaos, so one person's chaos is somebody else's not chaos. So, but it's the fact that you actually, it's like, well, here's this bit of time. Is it for me or is it for doing this thing? And actually, it's for me. Thank you very much indeed. And we need more of that. And that, for me, while somebody else may not see that as being radical, that is radical.
I think that's pretty radical.
Because it is, because we have been conditioned otherwise, completely, 100%. So I think that I love that. And actually, it's really interesting because my when my son first came to stay with me when I moved to Radstock, he goes, it's so good to see you're more relaxed now, Mum. And I said, what do you mean? It's nice to see I'm more relaxed now. And he goes, because once upon a time, you would have been cleaning the plates the minute you walked in the door, you know, the counter. I couldn't sit down and relax until everything was done. And it's really, because I'm like, was I really that bad? But that's conditioning, because guess what? My mum was always like that. So I had taken that. And it was funny enough, when I moved to Radstock, away from, you know, a lot of my family, who I love dearly, I just thought, I'll still get it done, but it doesn't need to be done today. It doesn't need to be done right now. But it did make me laugh, because he noticed it straight away, and I was just like, what do you mean? Should I be offended? I'm not sure.
Hi, Angela. Hi.
Lovely to see you. So you're on mute, by the way, just so you know.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, it's press record. I don't know if I meant to do that, or sorry about that. So I just thought
It's okay.
Recording.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, you're all good. Okay, so we're talking. So we've just been talking about shouldisms, Angela, and Angela is here as an observer, a guest, if you like, listening to the round table, and perhaps have some questions. So we talked a little bit about shouldisms, and I mean that in itself could be a conversation, I think, for a day or two. But we won't go there. We understand that we have them. We've all probably experienced them to some shape or form, and have let go of them in different ways. And I think the other thing, so the next thing that I really wanted to ask about, because this again is something that is probably connected to the shouldisms, are the societal frameworks from which we operate. And I'm talking the patriarchy, I'm talking racism, I'm talking religion. There are lots of these different frameworks that are in place. And that definitely undermine the woman's status. And I just wanted to know, how, do you, is that something that you believe? And how do you believe that they have impacted your ability to self-care? Have they impacted, or have you just completely ignored them?
I think still, to a great extent, the domestic buck still stops with the woman, whether she's working or not. I think it's going to take a very long time, if it ever really, really changes fundamentally. I know we have fantastic house husbands, and some men are not emasculated if their wife is earning more than them, and maybe they have a cleaner in. But I think it still falls upon women fundamentally to be telephoned if a child at school is sick, even if I've heard stories where even if the husband is a house husband, they'll still call them mother. So how do we change that? I think we just keep speaking about it, and we keep strong in not accepting it as the status quo, but we can do that. I've sort of said with a female movement, we can do it in a feminine way. I won't ever be a bra burner. I need my bra. We can actually, no, not going to happen. But we can just keep talking about it, and be strong about what our expectations are of ourselves and any partner that we have, and talk about all manner of things to be understood.
Yeah.
Value.
Yeah.
Because
I'm not sure that's enough.
Conditioning is so powerful. So where would you go with that, Rosalind?
Well, I mean, I think that, just talking about it has been happening for a long time, So, it took, if you think of the suffragettes, for example, it took quite a lot more than just talking about it for women to get the vote.
Yes.
In this country, I'm not going to talk about other countries because I don't have the historical knowledge. But in this country, it took a lot for women to get the vote, and it wasn't just polite conversations.
Oh God, no, it was terrible.
Going to jail, being force-fed, it was,
yeah,
pretty hideous.
Yes.
And I think so back in the 1970s, in the first wave of feminism movement, there was a whole swathe of there was God, I can't remember. There was a movement called Wages for Housework by a number of women, and that's well documented. And where did that go? Has that changed enormously? No. I mean, this is what we were talking about earlier in terms of the women, or a woman in a household being the default position for picking up, other people's things, and so on and so on and so on. So I think it requires us to be more radical. I think it requires, because it's all part of the conditioning and the people pleasing and the so on, that we actually don't do the face off, because So, you know, it's like, so you can say, okay, let's start with one small thing. I am not going to pick up. I am not going to do that washing. I am not going to, unless it's by prior arrangement.
Yes.
You know, it's like, you know, because now we're in a position where economically, in order to buy a house in this country, if you wanted to buy a house, it requires the wages of 2 people, you know, unless you're from inherited wealth or have some other, a lottery winner, or, you know, some other extraordinary circumstances. But for most people, it requires 2 wage earners, in which case, then there's an immediate parity there. You know, forget about whatever gender, whatever sex you are. It doesn't matter. There's a parity in the fact you're both having to earn in order to, if you're sharing a house, in order to put the house together. So therefore, there should be a parity on everything else. Now, there's a discussion to be had, isn't there? So, for example, I hate bike maintenance. If I had a live-in partner, I'd say, I'm really happy to sew the buttons on your shirt if you hate sewing, in exchange for you doing my bike maintenance. You know, like, it's a conversation.
And it could be vice versa. It doesn't matter what.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I mean, I'm just using that as an example. It could be, you know, so it could be, I love bike maintenance, and, you know, you love sewing. I mean, you know, I mean, and whatever manifestation of partners you've got, it might not be a husband, it might be a wife. You know, it doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make is, the very fact that we just default because we don't want to see the mess, or we don't want to actually have the conflict. That's really what it boils down to.
I did have the conflict, actually, although I say we could talk about it. My second husband, he would leave his socks and pants and even on the windowsill I'd find socks. Odd place to put them. And I brought him up about, and I said, do you expect me, if I'm doing the laundry, do you expect me to actually pick up your bits of clothes from all over the house? He said, yes. But that was the same husband who told me I owed him £15,000 because he'd fed me and put a roof over my head for the past few years as my husband. Although I put £1,000 a month into the care of me and my daughters. So that was on a hiding to nothing, that one. But it is that expectation. Yes, he expected me to pick up after him. And then, you know, I fed you and put a roof over your head. It's like, wow. Where does that come from?
Wow.
So, oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's scary to me. I'm just like,
literally, my jaw.
There's the end of my foot and there's the door.
It didn't last much longer after. But anyway, do you want to get back to radical self-care, Yvonne?
Yes. So and it's really interesting because I think I just wanted to add in there, you know, because I said about the societal frameworks, but obviously within that also is role modeling what we see, because I came from a home where, and you were saying, Rosalind, about parity. My mum and my dad, they both worked. They had 4 kids, they both worked, and they both worked shifts. So one was at home and the other. My dad cooked as much as my mum did. My dad did his 3 daughters' hair because mum was at work. I mean, there was no, well, you know, your hair doesn't get done because your mum's not here, or you don't get to eat until your mum comes home. So for me, that parity makes sense. Like it's always made sense to me. So I've always found it really challenging, in particularly in relationships, when the expectation was that, oh, you know, what are we having for tea? I'm like, I don't know. What are you going to cook?
Yeah.
Because don't look at me. Sorry, but that was, you know, the role modeling that I saw and that I experienced was that either one of us can do X, Y, and Z. So why are you even looking at me? That's not going to work. And we need, in order for this to really move forward, for the changes, we need to start confronting those expectations. It doesn't have to be an argument, but we need to confront them. Why do you feel that I am the one to do X, Y, and Z?
But yes, because it's just a generational thing. If we give this example to our children, then surely it is gradually that it's going to start to change, because it's the society begins in your own four walls. You can only immediately affect what happens in your own home. And therefore there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of that will begin to make a difference. You know, so
absolutely.
So that's what I mean. It begins with us. I mean, this is that whole thing of having the baton and passing the baton on. Nothing's going to change if we just keep on talking and not doing something, if we don't start challenging and showing up differently. And that is a responsibility we have to take.
Absolutely, it is.
Ain't no one going to do it for us.
No, it's the responsibility, you mean, as women?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, just like
as human beings, it's like, what are we modeling, particularly if we're parents? It's like, what are we modeling for our children? Because it's monkey see, monkey do, isn't it? It's like, you know, for the first 3 years, they're just watching you and absorbing everything like a car sponge. And then for the rest of their lives, they just reflect back what they've seen. I mean, with added bits as well, you know. So
does this resonate with you, Angela?
Oh yes, yes. I had my daughter say, was it the other week? Oh, but you like cleaning. I don't.
Gosh, that's interesting though, that was the perception she had.
Yeah.
Were you smiling as you did it, or have happy music on? Or
I mean, I do hum when I'm doing things. I hum, which
okay.
Did
you then explain to her? Well, actually, I don't really, but it's something that has to be done.
Yes, yeah. Well, I was with a friend at the time. She said nobody likes cleaning, but it has to be done. Yeah.
Yeah, but does it have to?
I thought people like cleaning.
Well, that's
have to be done by the woman in the house, or does it have to, or is it a shared task?
I do more. I think that would be, I don't think my other half would dispute that. I mean, he does other stuff which I'm not so good at. And yes, maybe sometimes I don't mind it because it's a way of just switching off and I can think of other things. But the thing is, I do like it clean. Yeah, but I have been aware of that, the whole role modeling. I think I've had this conversation with Yvonne before. It's like I think it's the aerial adverts. I don't know if you saw those, and they have somebody narrating over it, and it's basically, you know, the mother's busy, she's on the phone talking to somebody, putting the washing in, doing the dishes, all this, and her partner's up with his feet on the table watching football, and her father is narrating it, saying, well, I kind of taught her this and she thinks this is, you know, the way it should be. So yeah, I think
Is that a recent advert?
Yeah, fairly. I say recent, maybe a few years ago, but yeah.
Do you remember that fairy advert in our for hands that do dishes, soft as your face, always the woman? And I was thinking, hang on, just wear rubber gloves.
A washing machine. But again, it's all these messages, and this is the thing. I feel like it's just been embedded, and I spoke about this on the last session that I just was. It's like it's been embedded into our DNA, because the messages are just constantly filtering from the TV and the adverts to the films. Everything that we see feeds into this storyline. And so for me, I'm like, stuff this for a game of conquerors. We need to do better. I haven't got a daughter, but if I did have one, let me tell you now, she'd be having a very harsh talk from me about what she will not be doing going forward, because I think it's really important. We need to do better as human beings, and men need to and I'm not battering men either. I have a son and a grandson who I love them all dearly, my brother and my father. But they need to understand that whatever society has told them about them being more than and us being less than is a load of bleep.
Bollocks.
Yes.
Sorry.
We can say that because we're all over 18. It's fine. Because it's not okay. And that message has got to, we have got to be behind changing that. And for me, that's why radical self-care is absolutely the way forward. Yes, have the conversations, because I think there's still lots that needs to come out. I think women are still holding lots of stuff. So it needs to come out. But then we unpack it and just say, right, now what? What do we do now we've unpacked it? And where do we go with this? And that's why for me, like bringing visionaries, what I class you as, together to say, right, let's get this journey kick-started, because we have got to have a different result.
And to stand firm on the fact that sometimes I come first. You know, that the self-care, because the old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. I literally have made myself ill, very ill, with doing too much to make sure that everything was done and everybody else was taken care of. Yeah. And I, like many women, came last on the list. And it's just foolish. But when we're in that frame of mind and self-care is not a priority for us, then, you know, we do really damage ourselves. And a talk that I used to give about indulgence, proper indulgence is not selfish, it's self-full. And if we don't practice proper indulgence, and that's, as I say, it's not just a bubble bath, then we are not going to be able to be how we want to be, to show up for others, but also for them, to show up for them. So self-care is a fundamental right, but we have to take it ourselves.
Well, I would also say, actually, I would turn that on its head to some degree and say it's actually essential. Yes. Because, you know, I don't live where you live, and you know, only I live, you know, I live here. You know, and therefore, if I am to be of service, either in the wider environment or to my immediate family, then the first thing I have to do is make sure that I am fed and watered.
Absolutely.
You know, I have to be physically fit and, you know, emotionally sound, and, you know, and you know, spiritually well. You know, those things take time and energy to achieve those things, especially working within the backdrop that we're working within, which, you know, for the majority of households have got their smart speakers and their televisions pumping in a very different message 24/7. And so, you know, there's a wonderful book called Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and in there she talks about the selfless woman, and I love what she said. She said, who wants to be without a self? You know, and it's, you know, it's just like the very concept of the selfless woman is just such a nonsense.
It
absolutely, and I remember, anyway, I'll stop because I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, no, but that's such a good point. And I think, you know, that, you know, using it as self-care, it's essential. It's essential. It's not a nice, I always say it's not a nice to do. It's an essential requirement. If you want to fulfill your dreams, your goals, your purpose, blah, blah, you best put self-care at the top of your list, because otherwise you won't have what it takes to get there. It's as simple as that.
Yeah,
and you're modeling that. You're then modeling that for your children. I remember when my son was, you know, at varying different ages, and at some point, I don't know, he was a teenager, and we were in another phase of me living in chaos. And we'd both be sitting there having something to eat or whatever, and he'd look around and he'd go, oh, it's just so horrible. And I'd go, yeah, I agree, it's really horrible. And I'd say, do you want to do anything about it? And he'd go, oh no. And I went, no, me neither. You know, it's just like, do you see what I mean? It's just like, you know, who wants to play doing something with this? Neither of us, actually. Fine, then we live in chaos. Do you know what I mean? There's something about there's a real value in showing that actually it's not the magic pixies that come at night and do it. Yes. It's like, it's us that does it. You know, if you want to live in somewhere beautiful, you need to make it beautiful. Whoever 100%. You are, whoever is living there.
Yes.
So,
very well said.
Love that.
I'm totally with that. And I guess that feeds into this other question that I wanted to pose, was about, you know, the concept of personal conditioning, you know, how we have conditioned ourselves by adopting the expectations of others over our true desires.
Blimey. Well, I think one of the ones that I get very amused about these days is I don't shave anything. I'm not, it's like the whole concept of like removing my hair for what reason? I'm never very sure about that. It's like, what am I doing this for? So I haven't done it for years. And so, and I sauna and I swim regularly, and I often wear shorts and so on, and I often get the once over, it's just, or a double take, somebody will go,
but I think,
look at my face, look at my legs, can't quite decide what to do about it, so, and then I give the once over back, I'm like,
but it's a
and
choice.
then I smile.
This is all about the choices that we make, and it's about being one who was brought up to be obedient, didn't even know I had choices, that I could make choices. And then when you know that you can choose, I'm running a social media campaign at the moment on all about makeup and barefaced beauty, because a new photo shoot that I'm offering is Barefaced Beauty, the Natural Me, to enable women to feel good about themselves just as they are. This is me. I love makeup. I choose to put makeup on, not every single day, but if I'm showing up for something, it's part of my grooming and and I've got a very bland face. I'm not saying it's not pretty when it's no makeup. I have value for myself now, but I'm just different. And in fact, Ian said a couple of weeks ago, it's like having two of you. One without, you're one person without, and I said, no, it's not. They're both me. You have one person, but it's like being naked or having clothes on. You dress for how the occasion is, but we are one person. And I think that person who cares for themselves and shows up is practicing self-love. So the choice, but it's a choice that you make.
It is, it's absolutely a choice.
You're practicing because you're choosing. Why would you need to shave for somebody if you don't want to? Not for somebody. You're choosing to do that because it suits you and you're not hurting anybody. My eldest daughter has tattoos. My mother hated them, So, and I just asked her one day, why, darling? And she said, because I wouldn't be me without them, mummy. And I said, I think that's a great answer. I mean, she's not hurting anybody. They're not my cup of tea, but she has every right to choose. And I thought by saying I wouldn't be me without them, I just thought that was a very powerful answer. How can you argue that?
Indeed.
Choices, all about choices.
Yeah, I agree.
So
and I suppose, yes, it is about choices, but it's about feeling you have a choice. And I think, so in a recent, I was going back to that particular one, when I was in a steam room with a group of women who were out on a spa day, and they were just chatting, and they were talking about that subject. So at which point I said, and so why do you do it? And there was a range of different answers. One was society dictates. Another one was, mine's, I don't like the German way, whatever the German way is. And,
are we talking about hair or tattoos?
Yeah, we're talking about removing hair on the body, and
Germans don't do it. A lot of the women in Germany don't remove them.
I see. Right. Okay. So I was just, it was just really, I didn't pass comment, but it was really fascinating.
Yes.
Just to see what the response was, And I say, the society dictates one with lots of nodding heads was quite interesting.
Yeah. I think
that's what. Sorry, I just want to say that's partly what we're talking about here. Society expects women to be selfless, and be caring for everyone else. And so there's something about how much are we prepared to do to upend those expectations?
But that expectation of society is projected through the media. It's another whole new ball game.
Yeah,
and something against which we need to stand. Because
absolutely. But I think even getting women to understand and I know it sounds almost stupid, the concept of choice, but because I think we have lost the concept of choice, that, well, actually, if I'm being told that, you know, my hair needs to look a certain way, my makeup needs to be done a certain way, all these things, in order for me to be acceptable to who and by whom.
Yes, yeah.
You know, I'm sorry, go and do one. I am not, God did not put me here to make sure that you were okay. Actually, you know, you deal with your thing and whatever that looks like, and allow me to make the choices that resonate and sit with me. I don't need to get into an argument about it. I don't need you to agree with me or vice versa. I just believe that as human beings, the decent thing is to allow human beings to be human beings and show up as they choose.
The challenge is, in a way, it's early days. Rosalind, you mentioned the suffragettes. When I published my first book in 2017, at the launch, in my speech, I said that 100 years ago, we didn't have the vote. And actually, we had only women over 30 who I think were married had the vote. It was 10 years later when every woman had the vote. Women were not allowed to be doctors, judges, or lawyers, and were not allowed to go to Oxford or Cambridge. And rape within marriage was not a crime. That's only 100 years ago. And for gender parity, certainly in employment, on the International Women's Day website, they stated that it was going to take another 200 years before we see real gender parity in the workplace. And I thought, why? With the communication methods, and that's
why I'm self-employed.
Why? You know, we could get this sorted in a year if you got women out there, talking, thrashing it through. What's so difficult about, I don't know, the BBC paying a woman to do the same, who's doing the same job as a man? What's so difficult about paying them the same wage?
Because it breaks all of the constructs that they put in place in the first place. And let us not forget that they are there, they are existing, and they come in all of their, you know, wrapped in all their finery, whatever they want to class it as. But at the end of the day,
they have the power.
Yeah, we have a society that is taught to divide. And there's purpose and reason behind that for those powers that be. And even if it's, but here's the thing, even if it's going to take 200 years, I want to do what I can now. I'm not going to be here in 200 years. That's a given. I mean, goodness, you know, I can only look after myself for so long and so well. But I'm here today, so I can do something today.
Now.
And whatever that is, that's what I want to do, because it has to get better. It has to get better.
Encourage others. So this platform, Permission to Thrive platform that you've created with a lot of work and passion, Yvonne, is absolutely fantastic. And it's early days, but it will build and grow, because the topics and everything are so, and as you know, right up my street, very, very important. There's a hell of a long way to go. So bravo for making this community.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, all I wanted to say was I'm really conscious of time, and I wondered if you had any points you wanted to raise, Angela, or things you wanted to.
That's where I was going next.
Or sorry, I suddenly jumped into your place. I'm sorry.
No, I just took off mute. No, I think you've raised lots of it. I mean, I think also the whole rape within marriage, that wasn't until the 1990s, if I'm correct. I interviewed a lady who was one of the first to prosecute, and it's shocking to think it's taken that long. And I mean, it's just an event I was at earlier this morning. They were talking about mindset around money and how women have a different view on it, and it can be about validation and so on. And also, we're saying about the pay gap. Also, women don't tend to ask for pay rises as often or as maybe as comfortably, and that possibly goes back to people pleasing. And so it's, I'm not saying it's our fault, but I'm saying it's that being brought up to be people pleasers maybe, and it's getting down to the root of it in that regard as well.
It's similar to when a woman, I remember it was Carrie, our business coach, who shared a video during some training of a man selling something. The example was a mobile phone, and a female selling this mobile phone, and they did the female first, and she would go here, and it described, oh, it's beautiful, and oh, what else can I give you? Oh, and I'll give you a discount, and then, oh, I don't know if I should take that amount of, and the man stepped up and said, here you are, it's this amount, do you want it? And it's this thing where we, you know, asking for reward, even if it's a justifiable and valid reward, such as being paid for a product or a service, females have huge challenge with. So again, asking for pay rise. And I don't know if it's a primordial thing of we are the nurturers and men are the providers, primordially, not anymore. Oh,
yeah. It's a lot, but here's the beautiful thing. Is Rosalind is a really great unpacker of stories, and I know that, and that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to you bringing into the community, Rosalind, is the difficult and bloody uncomfortable conversations, because we need to have them. You know, we ain't going to get radical about anything unless we do. And understand, you know, where we're operating from and why, you know, what is the voice or the voices that are still ruminating inside of us that we need to stamp out and replace with a better voice. And the better voice will be better for everyone. So it's not about just being better for self. It will make a better world. And my good grief, do we need one? 150%.
Absolutely, and they do say that in a family household, the mother, the female, is the barometer or thermometer for the happiness. So if we don't look after ourselves and we're burned out and miserable, then, you know, it's not going to be a very happy home. And we shouldn't put that pressure on ourselves to be that person, but it is just the way it is. And I mean, you know, I can remember being fed up or burnt out because I did not look after myself, and everybody suffers with that.
Of course they do. Of course they do. Anyway, any parting words, Rosalind, from you? Anything that you would kind of want to just put a final stamp or thought on?
I think I would just say to some degree, it's also about context. You know, what's the context that we're in any given moment? What's the frame we're putting around something? The choices we're about to make, whatever it is, whether it's making a cup of tea now or later, having that job, leaving a husband, it doesn't matter what the choices are. It's like, what's the context for this? You know, there's something about context for me that's really important. And I'll leave you with my strapline from my website, which is, I'm curious about the stories we're telling ourselves and the tales we're telling others, because those two things are not the same.
They're not the same. I like that.
So it's about being the authenticity and kidding ourselves. Who are we kidding?
I mean, thank you. I really enjoyed this. I just feel like we could do this for like days and weeks, but that we need to, and there is that kind of blend of what Susie said about we need to talk, and then Rosalind, you adding that we need to do, and there is this balance and act of the two, but we need to start somewhere. And if that's the conversation, then that's absolutely where we get the impetus to do the rest.
And
so thank you so much for your time.
Lovely. See you later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.